people are saying that you do, in fact, have a beautiful voice.
Oh boy,
Aww.
Thanks, guys.
Look at that. Well, we are going to start, where are we? Luke
19.
Chapter 19.
Here we go.
Verse 1.
It's a great story.
This is what we were looking forward to doing with you last night. We're going to do it tonight. Before we start, can you just give us a little just overview of where we're at in the world right now and in Jesus' timeline where we are?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Jesus has set his face toward Jerusalem to go to the cross now for quite a few weeks. And at this point, we are coming up on the last week of his life. We're not quite there yet, but we're getting pretty close to it. So as he's going up to Jerusalem, and remember, Jerusalem is up at about 3,300 feet. Jericho is way down in the valley, so he's going to actually be going uphill to go to Jerusalem. He is in Jericho, and Jericho was a very beautiful and balmy place. It had been known for its palm trees, for its fruit trees. There was a lot of agriculture there. They had aqueducts that would bring from the springs down into the valley. It was very warm, and
it just sounds kind of like a little paradise.
It was kind of a paradise. In fact, one of the Herods, there were quite a few of them, as you know, built a palace there because it was such a beautiful place. No longer is it really, but it was in these days. And it was also a place of commerce, which is kind of important to our story because of all of the agriculture. There was always trade in and out of Jericho. And of course, the tax collectors would sit there and they would count your axles and tax you, and then they would count your animals pulling your cart. They would tax you, and then
it's like the Pennsylvania Turnpike times 100.
Yeah, and then they would count what's in your cart, and they would put a value to it and expound on that and inflate it, and then charge you and take your stuff. And so
it was just extortion.
It was a great place for really greedy robber tax collectors, and there were a lot of them in Jericho. So that's how we'll open up our story, with this wee little man, Zacchaeus. Noelle, why don't you read us the story?
I would love to. We are in Luke chapter 19, starting in verse 1. It says this: Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was wealthy. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but being a short man, he could not because of the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, "Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today." So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. All the people saw this and began to mutter, "He has gone to be the guest of a sinner." But Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord, "Look, Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor, and if I've cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount." Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save what was lost."
That was Jesus's whole purpose for coming. Not to be a great teacher, although he was, not to make the world a better place, although he did. He came for one purpose, and that was to seek and save the lost, which is what I was when he sought and saved me. And hopefully you can say the same thing. Fantastic. So let's go back to the tax collector, because it says here, Noelle, that he was a chief tax collector.
Yeah, that's an interesting distinction. When it says that, what it's referring to is sort of his status in the tax collecting world, right? Is he was effectively a franchise owner of a tax booth. Or, I don't know what.
Tax booths.
Tax booths, yeah. So he would go to Rome, and he bought sort of like a tax franchise, and then he hired a bunch of tax collectors underneath him to go out and collect the taxes, and it's almost like getting a license, and then the people can work underneath your license.
It was a whole thing.
And so not only is this guy a tax collector, which we've talked about at great length about how these were, I mean, they're the mob. They're the mafia. They were horrible, horrible, horrible people, extortionists and murderers, and they were just awful.
Robbers, always.
Always
charged
robbers.
Way more tax. If you haven't been with us, charged way more tax of everyone because they didn't get paid for their job. Their pay was whatever extra they could get.
Yeah, so they're just extorting people left and right. So not only is he doing that, he is basically leading the pack, hiring people underneath him to go out and do it, which is just incredible. So his crimes are in some sense multiplied because he was enabling all these other people underneath him to do it as well.
That's
he
right.
was the chief.
That's right. And by the way, if you remember Matthew, one of the 12 apostles that Jesus called, was also a tax collector. Matthew was one of the underlings of a Zacchaeus. I don't think he worked for Zacchaeus because he's in the wrong area for that. He was way up in Galilee. This is way down south in Jericho.
But it would have been somebody like that. Who
exactly.
Kind of
so Matthew was like the little guy, not as wealthy, but still quite wealthy. And then he would have been working for a type of person like Zacchaeus that would have been extremely wealthy. So then it goes on to say that Zacchaeus wanted to see who Jesus was. Remember that as Jesus is now passing through Jericho, word has gone out throughout the entire nation of Israel. This is a man who can heal anything. He's wiped out disease in the areas he's been in. Everybody who comes to him and wants to be healed gets healed.
Yeah.
He's fed tens of thousands of people out of basically nothing. Word spreads, but the best of all was a few weeks prior when he was in Bethany, and Luke doesn't give us this miracle, but John does, where he raises a dead man named Lazarus who's been dead not 1, not 2, not 3, but for 4 days.
He's decomposing. So
there's no way that people could say, like, maybe with the other ones they would have said, oh, well, we don't know if he really raised that girl from the dead, or because, you know, probably she wasn't dead.
Yeah.
Because it was quickly after the death. Not this one, man. He was buried for 4 days and he comes out of that tomb. So here's a man who raises dead people. So as he's passing through, he's kind of like a magnet for people, and the crowd is getting huge. Also, it's getting close to the Passover, and people are going to make the trip up to Jerusalem anyway. Around 2 million, we think, will end up in Jerusalem for Passover. So they're already kind of heading that direction. They're getting on with Jesus there, and they're all going up together. So Zacchaeus, as a total outcast, because remember, tax collectors were considered not just unclean, but by especially the religious people, totally unredeemable.
Cannot be saved. Will never be able to be in the good graces of God again.
No, God would never save a person like that, was their mindset. So Zacchaeus knows he's got no shot. He's just got no shot. But he's really curious.
Yeah.
And he wants to see Jesus. So it says in verse 4, and by the way, always trying to give you like Bible study principles, so when you dig into the word yourself, you've got the right framework to do your hermeneutic study. One thing that you want to do, we just say observation. Read a text, read it over several times and see what you pick up, because there might be things that get past you on a first or second reading that on a third or fourth, you suddenly go, oh, that just jumped off at me. So what jumped off at me was when it says, so he ran on ahead. I didn't see that the first few times. And then all of a sudden, bam.
Light bulb.
So let me ask you, and this is more if you've been with us. If you've not been with us, don't feel bad. You're going to pick this up. What is the significance of the fact that Zacchaeus ran on ahead where Jesus was about to pass through? He went out of the town and he ran. Love to hear your thoughts. Is that significant? And if so, tell me why you think it's significant.
Why do we care? One of the things that you talked about that's sort of relevant to this is that it says he goes up into a sycamore fig tree, which would have been planted slightly outside the city, right? And so he's running ahead. He's running outside the city a bit to get there ahead of time. Judy says men didn't run. Yeah,
right.
Carolyn, Jewish men don't run. Emily, they didn't run. Yeah. Why didn't they run? What was the problem with running?
Yeah. Daddy got it. Men didn't
not
run.
Dignified.
Not dignified.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not dignified.
Yeah.
And so the whole concept is there. Kimberly has it. It was embarrassing because they had to hitch up their robes. Right? So they've got these really long robes. James says running meant pulling up your tunic, showing your legs. This is taboo. They did not show their ankles. They did not show their legs ever. And so having to pull up their robes, I mean, for the ladies who've worn long dresses at any point, you can't really run. You got to pull it up if you're gonna move with any sort of speed. He's gotta pull that up so that he can run. Horribly undignified. It's awful. And Bob brings up, this is, we talked about this when we discussed the prodigal son, is that the prodigal son's father ran to meet him. And so this is something that you don't normally do. It would have been extremely undignified. Just sort of like, yeah, it just reflects poorly upon yourself. I don't know if we have anything in our culture that can even...
I don't know that we do, because we don't have a shame and honor culture here.
Yeah.
We're very individualistic, and we kind of take pride in doing what we want to do as individuals. They did not have that. It was shame, it was honor, and you didn't want to be shamed. This was very shameful to do. But what I think he was doing, and he would have told this story later on, because I don't think anybody was around. They were all back with Jesus. And he's thinking in his mind, I don't really have a shot at seeing him because I'm so short and the crowd is so huge anyway.
Okay.
Plus, people are so mean to me and they hate me. But if I run on ahead, I could get into a tree out there on the outskirts of town, and then I'll climb up, I'll hide. And as he passes by, I can catch a glimpse of him. And so that's what he does. He pulls up his robes, presumably, and he runs because he doesn't think anybody's watching, and he gets to a sycamore tree. Noelle, how would a short little man have been climbing a tree anyway?
I don't know how.
Oh, okay. Well,
I'm thinking about how I climbed when I was a little kid, and you like put your leg up and hook it over. And...
Exactly. The sycamore fig trees would have started to branch out where you could like get a foothold pretty low. Some trees will grow, like 100 feet, and then all of a sudden you branches. It's not like that. But yeah, he would have. I mean, this is just so incredibly undignified of him to be in this tree, because not only now has he lifted up his robe and run, but like climbing a tree in a dress, ladies, that is not a good idea. Not only do you have your ankles exposed at this point, I mean, you're just exposed. You know what I mean?
It's not possible to gracefully climb a tree in a dress or a robe in this case.
And then once you're up in the tree with people standing, no, not in a dress, not in a robe, not a good idea. So that's how we know he would have been hiding up there, because he would never have wanted anyone to look up and see everything.
Yeah.
So that's his mindset is, okay, I'll run ahead. Nobody will see me. I'll find one of those sycamore figs. I'll sling my leg over. I'll climb up in it. And the leaves are big and it's very leafy. Especially in a place like this where it's so warm, and balmy. And so I'll just hide. And when Jesus goes down the road, then I'll just watch and I'll be able to see him. So this is Zacchaeus' mindset.
Great.
And what I love about this, guys, no undergotchis, Emily says. Exactly. What I love about this is that in God's incredible, amazing providence, Zacchaeus has his plan. He knows how this is going to go. He's not thinking about spiritual things, presumably. I don't think he's not trying to meet Jesus. He's trying to avoid him. And God...
He just wants to see. He just wants a peek.
God sees this man and goes, I want you, Zacchaeus, and today is the day of salvation for you. You don't know it yet, but I'm coming after you. Woo! That just gives me some goosebumps.
It's gonna be awesome.
Yeah.
So Zacchaeus goes up. He climbs up into this tree where presumably nobody would see him. And also, who's going to be looking up into these trees? I mean...
Oh, yeah.
Jesus is there. Yeah, you're focusing on Jesus.
The crowd going by. Yeah.
Jesus walks by. He gets under the tree.
He stops.
Zacchaeus? You can just imagine Zacchaeus like, the Messiah.
Don't miss this. Jesus has never met Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus, to his knowledge... Jesus has no clue who he is.
And why would he? He's a sinner. You wouldn't expect this wonderful rabbi, teacher, or Messiah to know the name of such a horrible sinner, the worst of the worst.
And Jesus has not been hanging out in Jericho prior to this, so he wouldn't have met him there. It's not like he was up in Galilee where maybe he would passed him. This was the first time ever. And I just love how understated the Bible is. Like, again, observation. If you don't stop and think about that, it could get right past you that Jesus stops, looks up in a tree where people are not usually hiding.
No.
Calls him by name because Jesus knows, because he's God. And I love what this is just so amazing.
Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today.
Yeah, come on down. I'm inviting myself over. I mean, it's amazing. The people around him just had to be like jaw on the ground. Like, first of all, who are you talking to? Oh my word, there's someone in the tree. Oh my word, it's that tax collector. What is he doing up there? Oh. oh man, come on. I can
Keeps
just
it
see
down.
the whole thing unraveling in front of us.
Everyone's stunned. And also Jesus is like, I'm coming. This is what's amazing. I'm going to stay at your house, Zacchaeus. Now, this is even true today. The people you have stay at your house are people that you hold in high regard. You don't just let random people stay at your house, and certainly not people you dislike or hate. When Jesus says, I'm going to stay at your house, particularly in this time, to have the rabbi stay at your house was a huge privilege and honor. I mean, there's almost nothing greater. I even know of my Jewish friends today that I had Thanksgiving with one of my Jewish friends, and the big deal was that their rabbi was going to come have Thanksgiving with them. And I got to meet the rabbi, and he was a lovely man. But this is a huge deal. Like, just even coming over for dinner is a big deal for these people. I'm going to stay at your house? I mean, this is an alignment in many ways. Yeah.
And remember that they all would have considered Zacchaeus to be completely unclean and unredeemable.
Yeah.
So here is the person that they're starting to really think, maybe this is the Messiah that's going to save us from Rome. They got the whole rest of it wrong, but at least they were kind of close on the first part of it. He's going to what?
He's going to stay at his house?
He's going to eat with him and stay over? I mean, it's going to make him unclean. But the thing is, you can't make Jesus unclean.
No.
But he can make you clean.
Yeah.
And so Zacchaeus scrambles down out of the tree.
And in verse, it says, so he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. You can imagine how, like,
he can't believe it.
This is a huge honor. This is huge. And the people all saw this, and they began to mutter, he has gone to be the guest of a sinner.
So the crowd already kind of turns on Jesus a little bit here. Like, wait.
This does not fit within my paradigm of who you're supposed to be.
No. How disappointing. Why are you doing this? Why are you going to his house? They hate him. And here's this Messiah figure that's going to go hang out, have dinner, and maybe stay the night? What? They can't get over it. And then I love what happens next. And who knows what the conversation was. We get such a tiny bit of this. Just understand that this is not everything. They're walking along. Jesus is talking to Zacchaeus. And somewhere along the line, because we know that Jesus came to seek and save the lost, Jesus is going to be saying something to the effect of, yeah, you are a sinner and you need forgiveness. And I came to forgive you. God can and will forgive you if you are willing. And it says that Zacchaeus stopped. I'm picturing Jesus walked with him for quite a while, and all of a sudden Zacchaeus got it. He stopped and he says to him, Lord, that's a good sign right there. Lord, half of my possessions I will give to the poor, and if I've defrauded anyone of anything, which is, yes, you have, I will give back 4 times as much. Noelle.
Yes.
Last chapter, we just talked about a rich young ruler.
Yeah.
Who came to Jesus and said, what do I have to do to inherit eternal life? And Jesus pretty much said what Zacchaeus just said here.
Yeah, I'm going to read it to you. It's in chapter 18, verse 22. It says, when Jesus heard this, he said to him, this is to the rich young ruler, you still lack one thing, sell everything you have and give it to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven, then come follow me. And this is in response to this rich young ruler saying, how can I enter the kingdom of God? And Jesus says, well, what you need to do is sell everything, right?
Yep.
And so...
But we said at the time, that actually was to elicit the response of, whoa, I need help. I can't do this on my own. All of Jesus's questions. If you didn't hear that one, I think that was 2 nights ago. Go back and listen to it because it's really valuable to hear it. But at this point, the outpouring of actual salvation, real heart change, is always a changed life.
Absolutely.
If you don't have the changed life, that only points back to the fact that you probably didn't get the change agent, Jesus Christ, in the first place.
And we can see that because it says, Jesus says, today salvation has come to this house.
Exactly.
And he doesn't say, because you're going to do this, you now have salvation.
That's right.
Good job, now you've got salvation. Yes, go sell all that, then you'll have salvation. He's saying, today salvation has come to this house. Your response indicates a change in your heart. And we talk about this all the time, is that Jesus sees the heart, God sees the heart. And that, I love how Margie puts this, good works are a result of grace, not works to gain God's favor. And so the natural impulse of Zacchaeus, he's had a changed heart. His natural inclination, his natural draw is, I want to now do what's right. I want to be righteous. I want to, because I've received such grace from God, I want to pour that back out.
Exactly.
And we often compare this to, you know, if you've had, and I hope this hasn't happened to you guys, but some of you may have had people in your life that have said, oh, I love you so much, and they speak all these words of love upon you, and they never ever act like it, and they're horrible, and they do awful things to you, and they abuse you. And you've seen people like this, right? And you go, they couldn't actually love because their actions are not even remotely aligned with what love naturally produces, right?
Excellent.
And so this guy truly loved Jesus. He truly loved the Lord. He truly received salvation, and therefore his actions were a natural result of what had already happened in his heart. Beautiful. Whereas the rich young ruler hadn't had anything happen in his heart. And Jesus is trying to point this out to him, going, you know, if you truly had a heart change, your actions would align with that. Your actions would be different than what they actually are. You did something that I thought was awesome, and that was really compare the rich young ruler to Zacchaeus, because ultimately what we have here, just one chapter apart, probably maybe a few weeks or days apart in the actual timeline.
Yeah, probably a couple weeks.
What we have here is one man who approaches Jesus and says, what do I do to gain salvation, to become part of the kingdom? And walks away without salvation. And the second is we have somebody who didn't even approach Jesus, didn't even ask Jesus, and walks away with salvation. Talk us through some of the differences between these two guys, because it's really an interesting comparative study.
So the rich young ruler, and then we have Zacchaeus over here. So the ruler sought out Jesus, Zacchaeus. Jesus sought him out.
Yeah, oh, I love
that.
The
ruler was respectable. Zacchaeus, total outcast.
And additionally, just heaps insult upon himself as he runs and climbs into this tree.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Everything he's doing is not respectable.
Undignified, right? Dignified ruler, undignified Zacchaeus for sure. Ruler got his money through very respectable means. Zacchaeus, he stole it from other people, basically. The ruler believed he was righteous. Zacchaeus knew he was the worst of all sinners. The ruler was told to give things away and said no. Zacchaeus was not told to give things away and volunteered he was going to give almost everything away. The ruler walked away disappointed. Zacchaeus walked away with Jesus rejoicing. The ruler saw good deeds as a means of salvation. Zacchaeus saw good deeds as a result of salvation. And when it says in chapter 17, it is harder for a rich man to get to heaven, basically, than for a camel to go through the eye of a needle, it ends up by saying the things that are impossible with people are possible with God. And here is the example of that very thing. We have a very wealthy man who we will see in heaven someday. If you're going to be there, you will see Zacchaeus. And we also believe, because his name is mentioned, that the readers of the book of Luke that it was originally written to may have known Zacchaeus from church, that he ended up being a leader in the early church.
He continued to follow Jesus and would have been some sort of public figure.
Yep.
They would have been like, oh my gosh,
yeah,
I know that guy. It's like Bartimaeus, who we talked about last night. In the book of Mark, it tells us his name. And it says his name was Bartimaeus, because the people reading were probably like, oh my gosh, I know that guy.
Yeah.
He's told me this story before. How cool to see it from another perspective, right? And so it's so incredible to see God changing lives.
And
like
he
this.
still does.
He so still
does. Yeah, so today's salvation has come to this house because he too is a son of Abraham. Remember that they considered this guy unredeemable. He goes, he's your Jewish brother.
Yeah.
And I came, he ends up by saying, to seek and save that which was lost. Jesus is always seeking and saving lost people. If you're not lost, then you can't be found. So the first thing that we have to do is just get through our thick heads. I'm a sinner. I need salvation. That's the first step. But if you're willing to admit that, and you're willing to humble yourself and come to the foot of the cross, Jesus will save you. It's amazing.
Yeah. I also want to point out something that's interesting, again, as we sort of compare the rich young ruler with Zacchaeus. So the rich young ruler, what Jesus said was, sell all your things, give them to the poor, right? as a means to kind of get this guy down the path. Zacchaeus says something differently. He says, I'm going to give half of my possessions to the poor, and if I've cheated anybody out of anything, I'll pay back 4 times the amount. And this is a very specific and sort of odd thing to say, right? He's going to take his entire estate, he's going to presumably liquidate it, give half of it to the poor. The other half is now reserved for the people that he has cheated out of the things that he's taken from them. He's a tax collector. Literally everything he has is because he cheated people of his money. So when he says, I'm going to repay them for X, how is that possible, right? And there's sort of 2 answers to this. One is his investments would have grown over time. So he has more money than just what was necessarily put in there.
I'm sure he's a shrewd businessman.
Very smart guy. But secondly, he is indebting himself to other people in service. That he is going to pay back this debt over some prolonged period of time, which is really incredible, right? And the way he would do that, who knows? But this isn't like the other guy who's just like, hey, sell all your things, go out. Zacchaeus is saying, not only am I going to give away literally everything I have, I'm going to give away more on top of that. Because the grace that has been given to me was so great, I'm going to give it, which is really cool.
What a life change. Wow.
In a few short moments with Jesus, this is what you get from this guy.
That's an encounter with the living God.
Really
I'll tell
cool.
you. Well, we need to move on to the next story, Noelle, because we'll be doing well if we can get through this. Okay, this next one, I just want to lay out first. In fact, maybe I should give you a summary and then read it. I think I might do that because it's a little bit confusing. I felt a little confused after reading it, had to go back, read it quite a few times, and then I just kind of made a summary.
I think your summary is great. Go through the summary.
It just kind of compartmentalizes it, so when we read it, hopefully it will all fall into place.
We're going to be in verses 11 through 27 for this.
So let me give you a summary first, and we'll read it. First of all, this parable he is telling in response to people's errant belief that he is bringing the ruling and the reigning kingdom and he's going to take out the Romans. So they're still just camping out on this. He just cannot talk them out of it. So he's going to tell them a story in response to that. Here's the story. A nobleman goes far away to a country to receive the right to rule from someone in a position of authority a little higher than him. Okay, so the nobleman's going to take off. He's going to go get the right to rule from a higher authority. Then, upon being given the right to reign from this authority, he's going to come back to the country and he's going to rule over it. Okay, that's easy. Because he's leaving for an extended period of time, he's calling in 10 slaves actually, but he's giving 3 of them stewardship of money that he's going to call into account. In other news, so this is almost like a parenthesis, and this is where it can get confusing, so just kind of keep this bracketed in your mind. In other news, there are some citizens, not the slaves we were just talking about, but some citizens of the country who do not want him to reign over them. So they send a delegation to the higher authority and beg him and plead with him, don't let this man rule over us. So that's what they're going to do. We don't want him to be our ruler.
Now back to the main story.
Back to the other part, back to the slaves. The master returns, he sends for them, demands an accounting of what he gave them to manage, and then he rewards the 2 that did something good with it, and he rejects and rebukes the one who did not do anything with it. Then, back over to the parentheses again, the delegation that said, we don't want you to rule over us, not a good move on your part because he's back to rule and reign and he's going to cut them down right in front of them. So we kind of have like those 2 storylines going on at the same time. So as we read it, hopefully that'll kind of keep it all straight in your mind. Noelle, why don't you just read the whole thing to us?
I think with that sort of overview, this is going to make a lot of sense.
I hope so. I hope it's helpful.
This is a great story. I'm going to be reading verses 11 through 27 in chapter 19. While they were listening to this, he went on to tell them a parable because he was near Jerusalem and the people thought the kingdom of God was going to appear at once. He said, a man of noble birth went to a distant country to have himself appointed king and then to return. So he called 10 of his servants and gave them 10 minas. Put this money to work, he said, until I come back. But his subjects hated him and sent a delegation after him to say, we don't want this man to be our king. He was made king, however, and returned home. Then he sent for the servants to whom he had given the money in order to find out what they had gained with it. The first one came and said, "Sir, your mina has earned 10 more." "Well done, my good servant," the master replied. "Because you have been trustworthy in a very small matter, take charge of 10 cities." The second came and said, "Sir, your mina has earned 5 more." His master answered, "You take charge of 5 cities." Then another servant came and said, "Sir, here is your mina. I have kept it laid away in a piece of cloth. I was afraid of you, because you are a hard man. You take out what you did not put in and reap what you did not sow." His master replied, "I will judge you by your own words, you wicked servant. You knew, did you, that I am a hard man, taking out what I did not put in and reaping what I did not sow? Why then didn't you put my money on deposit so that when I came back I could have collected it with interest?" Then he said to those standing by, "Take his mina away from him and give it to the one who has 10 minas." "Sir," they said, "he already has 10. He replied, "I tell you that to everyone who has more, more will be given. But as for the one who has nothing, even what he has will be taken away. But those enemies of mine who did not want me to be king over them, bring them here and kill them in front of me."
Wonderful. Okay. Now, there is probably a little bit of history that you don't know that when I tell you, this story is going to absolutely come to life. Remember that when Jesus gives parables, he takes something very common, very understandable in front of the people. Sometimes it has to do with what's right in front of them. But in this case, he's going to take a story that they all know very, very well, because although it's history, it's not very ancient history to them at all. This is something that happened just a few years back that they're quite familiar with, and he's going to make a major point out of it, and you're going to get this in just a second. So at this time, Rome rules the known world. And as such, Rome wants to keep peace as much as possible. Pax Romana, right? So they were interested in peace. And they knew that they had overtaken so many countries, including Israel, that if they tried to have one king, Caesar, be the king over everybody and the only king over everyone, they were just going to have so much uprising from so many different locations. It just wasn't going to work. So what they decided is, look, Caesar will be king, but we'll appoint little kings under Caesar who, yeah, they have to answer to Caesar, but these countries can kind of have like their own subordinate king, and that will help keep the peace. And it was actually a really good idea. So because they did this, it was the Herodian dynasty that was appointed to rule over Israel, but as a subordinate dynasty under Caesar. And if you remember, Herod the Great was the Herod. Herod would be a term like king, by the way. It was not his name. Herod the Great was what he called himself, like the great king. He ruled when Jesus was born and had all the baby boys 2 and under slaughtered in an area because he had heard there was a rival king and he didn't want that. And they had to flee.
This guy was intimidated by babies.
Yeah, they had to flee to Egypt with Jesus when he was a baby to keep him from being slaughtered by this horrible, horrible man. Well, he died in, 4 BC. And if you're like, whoa, 4 BC, but what about the time of Jesus's birth doesn't really exactly line up, and there's no year 0, so he was little. Like, I think God just took him out after that. In or around 4 BC, Herod the Great dies. And he leaves in his will that he wants his whole dynasty of rule to go to his 3 sons. That would be Herod Archelaus, Herod Antipas.
We've talked about him.
They were full brothers. Herod Antipas is the one who had John the Baptist beheaded. That was up in the north. Archelaus would have been Jerusalem, Jericho, this southern area. And then you had Philip, who I can't remember where he was over like in Perea or something.
Philip was a half-brother.
Yeah, he was just a half.
He wasn't
the only one with a typical normal name, in my opinion. Who wants to name their kid Antipas? But anyway.
Archelaus, though.
Yeah. But anyhow, so that's what was going on here. So Archelaus had received from his father the portion down in Jerusalem, Judea, and Jericho. And one of the first things he did before he had gone to get his right to the kingdom from Caesar, like his dad had died and he thought, oh, I'll kick it off with a bang. He had about 3,000 Jewish people slaughtered in the temple. Not for any reason.
During Passover, right?
I don't know if it was during Passover or not. Might have been.
Awful.
But whatever it was horrendous. And he did it to scare them into submission, to exercise his newfound authority. And I guess just because he thought that would be fun. So he had them all slaughtered. And as you can imagine, that did not in any way endear him. Well, the time came for him and his brothers to make the trip to go see Caesar so that he could bestow on them the title of petty king, basically, a Herod. And so they all get there, and Philip gets the title, and Antipas gets the title, and Archelaus comes up. And the Jews had sent a delegation of Jewish people to trail him. And when he got to Caesar, they had already gotten to Caesar. And they were saying, please, do not let this man rule over us. He's horrible. We hate him. Don't let him rule over us. And Caesar, being a man of peace, looked at the situation and thought, oh man, we've got a problem. So he calls in Archelaus and he says, look, I'm going to let you rule, but you haven't earned the title of king yet because these people hate you. So you're going to have to not be a monarch. You're going to be an ethnarch, which means you just get to rule over an ethnicity, like a little area. So you don't get the full title until these people like you. So you better go back and make it right. So how happy do you think Archelaus was going home with his two brothers that were like, yeah, I'm king now. Woo, I'm the king. And he's like, I'm an ethnarch. What on earth is an ethnarch? Not happy about what happened at all.
And very angry with the people who caused this.
So Noelle, what did he do to them?
He went and killed them.
Yeah.
As soon as they all got back, he killed all those people that were part of the delegation.
Yep, slaughtered them in front of them. Not surprising. By the way, is this starting to sound, if you've been with it, this is exactly what Jesus just described. So as he's talking about this, in their minds, they can picture it. They know what he's talking about. Just as an aside, the Jews never accepted Archelaus as their ruler and Rome got sick of it. And so about 10 years into his reign, they just exiled him. And they said, you know what, this just didn't work out well. These people are too difficult. We'll just appoint a Roman over them. And over them was appointed Pontius Pilate, whose name you probably know. So he was actually the one in charge of ruling them. And you can see the entire plan of God coming together, even though the players don't know God, don't love God, have nothing to do with God. God is sovereign over all of them.
Did you mention what the heritage of these
the
guys
Herods
were?
Yeah, no, I don't think I did. Herods were not Jews.
Nor were they Romans.
No. They were what we say Idumeans, but basically they were descendants. If you're familiar with the Old Testament at all, you remember way back in Genesis, there were two brothers that were twins, Jacob and Esau. And Esau came out first of his mother, so he was supposed to get the birthright, you know, the double portion of everything, all the rights. But God had said, the older will serve the younger. He chose Jacob, the one that was second on the way out. And Jacob ends up actually stealing the birthright, basically, from Esau. It's a really interesting story. Well, Esau never forgave him, really, and his people never forgave Israel. The people of Esau became known as Edom, the country of Edom, and Edom was horrible to Israel.
Very angry.
Always. They hated them. They were almost like half-brother countries. They treated them so bad. When Israel was trying to get to the promised land, they had to go through Edom. Edom said, nope, not coming through. They would attack them from time to time. So the Herods were out of the Edomites. At this point, they had become known as Idumeans. That's an aside. But yeah, so they weren't even Jewish, and they absolutely hated each other. It wasn't a good scene.
Yeah. So all of that to say, you might be looking through this now and being like, okay, wait, I thought that Jesus was going to be the nobleman here.
Yes. Right.
And now it sounds like the guy that they're associating with is a genocidal maniac. Uh-oh. Yeah. How do we deal with that?
Yeah. It's like any analogy. It breaks down at a certain point and it's not really intended. Like parables are intended to get one major point across. If you start taking every single aspect in a parable and assigning it people and meaning, you're going to destroy the whole parable. That's not how Jesus intended it to be heard. He wanted to create a situation where the people could visualize what they were doing. They knew what it looked like to have a king ruling over them that they hated and had tried to oust, and that guy was still in charge, and he cut them down. And Jesus is saying, look, you're doing it again. You don't want me to be king, but I am, and I will be. And if you don't get it right, I will cut you down.
Yeah,
but it has nothing to do with the circumstances as far as
it's not speaking to the morality of the act.
No, not at all. It's a general, principle. That's all it is, and that's what parables are.
Right.
And beware of that, because sometimes you hear people talk about them and they will assign the atomic details, everything, and you just end up with this bizarre, nonsensical story. Yeah. So you don't want to do that. Just get the main point. That's why Jesus taught. That's why he did it. Woo! All right. Back to the story then. So that hopefully helps you a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about the minas, Noelle.
Yeah.
What was that, and why did they all get 10, and what's that all about?
They didn't all get 10. There were 10 of them. Each of them got 1 mina.
Oh, I thought they got 10.
No, there were... Oh. Okay, let's go back and read this. He called 10 of his servants and gave them 10 minas.
Oh, I thought he gave each of them 10.
Well, maybe he did.
We don't know.
Sir, your mina has earned 5 more.
Yeah, okay.
Sir,
I think she's right.
I think he only gave them each
I think he had 10
mina.
total and he just... Okay, I read that wrong.
I don't know if it matters too much, but a mina would have been about 3 months' wages, right? And so he's not giving this to them as their wages. He's giving this to them to steward over. So this isn't like, here's your wage for the next 3 months. Go spend it. But he's giving them the minas as, hey, this is what I'm giving you, and you're going to be a good steward of this, right? Everybody's all caught up on the how many minas each person gets now. I apologize for bringing that up. We're just going to say there were 10 guys. He had 10 minas. Each guy got 1 mina. What's important is, in this scenario, they all got the same amount of minas.
Right.
Okay? So they all had the same amount to steward over at the beginning. And he gives this to them.
And he says, do business with these, basically. Yeah. And Noelle, do you remember what the root of that, the root of...
Put on the spot here.
Sorry. The root of do business in the Greek is the same word that we get our word pragmatic from.
Oh, cute.
So he basically said to them, here's your mina, or minas, whatever. Be pragmatic with it. I want you to make good use of it. So, Noelle, what does this mean?
Well, go be pragmatic. Go invest this money. Go get a return on this money. Go make me more money with this money. Even in a worst case scenario, go set this in your savings account. I'll earn, 0.05% on it, Yeah. And so he's saying, take this, be a good steward of it. Go get a return on this for me. Go do business.
Yeah, exactly.
Makes a lot of sense.
3 months' wages, that's pretty,
That would have been substantial.
No, exactly. So 2 of them take it and they go and they multiply it. We don't know how long he's been gone for, but a period of time. They multiply it. 1 makes 10 more, 1 makes 5 more. And one of them, Noelle, it says he puts it in a cloth or in a handkerchief. So when Jesus, the nobleman, comes back, he says to the first one, how much did you do? Oh, I like how he says, your mina made 10 more.
Yeah.
Not I made 10 more. The mina was yours to begin with. I think this is huge for us.
That's a great statement.
Because it's very clear, isn't it, the application here, that this isn't about minas. This is you and me. Everybody is in this story somewhere. Hopefully we're one of the first 2. And God gives us something to manage, to be pragmatic with. Maybe it's your money. Maybe it's your time. Maybe it's your talent. Maybe it's your background and your upbringing. Whatever it is, it's his. It's not yours anyway. And you are a steward of what you do with what God has given you. The first guy says, it made 10. And the nobleman says, fabulous. Good. Here's your reward. I'm going to give you charge over 10 cities. Whoa,
that's a leap, isn't it?
That's pretty big.
Over here's money, now I want you to rule over these 10 cities.
Yes.
But the reason he did this, and you do this all the time with your children or your employees or just anybody you're with, is that you give them something small, you see how they deal with it, and then you progressively give them more.
Yeah.
Right? And so in many ways, this was a test so that he could see what they did with a little bit and then determine who is well suited to have more. And he saw that this guy went and earned 10 more mina for him and was like, you worked hard. You were smart. You were pragmatic. I like you. You get 10 cities. I need somebody to rule over these. Mm-hmm. Okay?
Yep. Then the next guy says, your mina made 5. And he doesn't say, oh man, loser, that guy made 10 over there. No, he's like, great, I'll give you more too. So you get charge over 5 cities. So he doesn't get as much, but he still did what he could. And listen, we were just talking before, God is not fair,
Right.
because being fair means sending everyone to hell the second that they sin. Some of you came out of really awesome backgrounds. You were taught the Bible from the time you were the littlest child. You've been brought up in great churches. You have had the Word of God. You married someone who loves Jesus. You have 10 minas. You better go make 10 more, okay? Or you have 1 minute and you better make 10 more. Some of you did not have that.
The circumstances around your life have been harder. You haven't had as many things to work with.
You didn't grow up in a home that ever talked about Jesus or gave you the Bible, or maybe you did, but it was a completely false religion and you had to figure your way out of that. And maybe you're married to someone who does not love Jesus, and every day your goal is just to get through the day somehow and, be a good testimony to Christ. Yeah. Okay, that's a whole different. So maybe you make 5 because you didn't get as much to start with as far as the circumstances go. That's still great. You do what you can do with the circumstances that you have. And as long as you're working for Jesus, you're going to be praised for what you do for him. It's the third guy. And by the way, I want to address a question that came up. Yes. I just don't want to forget. Okay, so what happened with the other guys that all got minas and we don't hear anything? More. Where are they? Jesus, I don't know. It's just part of the story. He just doesn't address it. They're just the bystanders. Yeah.
There's more guys that will come, hypothetically. He's just giving us the major examples.
Remember when I said if you try to go down to the atomic details of every single aspect of a parable, you're going to be really confused when you're done? Yeah, he put in 10. He only talked about 3. Not a big deal. Ignore the other 7. They just don't really matter in the story. I don't know why he did that. Maybe there's a reason, I don't know, but it just doesn't matter. But that's a great question. I'm really glad that you asked that, Roberta.
That's a good thought. We get to the third guy. And I like this. The servant comes, he says, sir, here's your mina. I have kept it laid away in a piece of cloth. Or maybe yours says in a handkerchief. And so what this guy did is he got his mina. I'm going to assume it's a coin. Gets his coin. He gets his handkerchief. Squirrels it away somewhere. And leaves it there. Okay. If this strikes you as, maybe not a wise idea. Oh my goodness, not a wise idea. At the very least, put it in a bank. Bury it somewhere. Don't stuff it in that. Like, that's going to get put through the wash. You're going to lose that coin forever. I mean, I don't know.
Someone's going to steal it.
That's a terrible place to put a coin.
They would bury their treasure. They never, ever put it in cloth and stuck it in their house.
He is reckless with it. Mm-hmm. He doesn't even care.
Okay, Deb is on his side. What if you put it in the cloth and then you take it out and then now try to make it work? Is that what you just said?
Yeah. I mean, theoretically, he could do that.
But he didn't in this story.
But he didn't.
This isn't a real person. He only does what Jesus says he did because he's not for real, and he's not really thinking because he doesn't exist. Again, it's just a general. We're just general here. But I appreciate your heart for him.
And Zara says it's based in fear. And what he says next is interesting. You'd be like, why would he go and put it, like, go ahead and bury it if you're not going to do anything with it. Put it somewhere safe where nobody's going to find it. Don't stash it away in a handkerchief. And he says, I was afraid of you because you are a hard man. You take out what you did not put in and reap what you did not sow. This is such an interesting statement. And particularly today, when we were talking about this statement really rang out to me because I hear things like this said by people, generally in regards to their bosses or to successful people or to other people that they interact with that they don't like. They don't even work and they just get all this stuff. They get out what they didn't even earn. You get to sow, you get to reap where you didn't even sow, and I was afraid of you because of that. It's really an indictment on the character and the deservedness of this nobleman. Basically, you get to, just give your money to us to work for, and then you get all the returns on it, and you didn't even have to work for that. And so I was afraid and decided not to partake in this sort of system. I know we don't have a lot of time, but you were reading a guy who had a really interesting take on this.
I was?
You were. He was called the Millennial Pastor.
Oh,
right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, his whole thing was, does this nobleman sound loving to you? And he said, no, he doesn't. So The guy who's the hero in the story is this guy, because he's the only one who had the guts to stand up to this nobleman who was so mean. And so he's the hero in the story. And I just sat back and I thought, how on earth did you get all this so right? I mean, you didn't even study. You don't even know the history behind this. This makes no sense. But I'll tell you what, when you don't have, you can put the name pastor on anybody. If you don't have the Holy Spirit opening your eyes to understand the Word of God, those are the kinds of things, and you don't have good interpretation, hermeneutics, those are the kinds of bizarre interpretations that you'll come up with.
Yeah, I could go off on this for like a whole nother Bible study, and I'll leave that. But think about that. This guy's response and what he's saying is this is a person that exists today. You've probably met this person who feels like, you know, this is unfair and this person has gotten all this stuff that they haven't worked for. I think the master's response is really fascinating. I will judge you by your own words, you wicked servant. He says, you knew, did you, that I am a hard man, taking out what I did not put in, reaping what I did not sow. Why then didn't you put my money on deposit so that when I came back, I could have at least collected interest on it? He's going, you don't even believe what you just said to me. If you honestly believed that I was a hard man, that you were afraid of me, then you would have at the very least done the bare minimum and put it on deposit so I could have gotten some interest back with it. No, what you did is you were reckless with it and you put it in an unsafe place where it could have been stolen, where I could have gotten nothing back. That's not even remotely correct. And here's the other thing that I think is interesting. This guy didn't have anything to steward ahead of this. It was the master's trust in him and faith in him and graciousness to him to give him a mina to be entrusted with and to steward over. And the guy's response is, well, you're a hard man and you don't deserve what you have. And so I was afraid, and so I just put it in a handkerchief and didn't do anything with it. And it's really interesting because what this guy is then doing, the master says, I'll judge you by your own words. Okay, you don't like that I reaped where I didn't sow? Fine. You will not reap where you didn't sow. That's fine. We can do that too. So you didn't work, you weren't pragmatic, you weren't a good steward of what I so graciously gave you. I won't give you anything else. That's fine.
Yeah.
If that's how you want it to be. Go ahead. We've got some good questions coming up right now.
Yeah, I was going to say, Deb Kirby is asking a question, and it went by so fast, Deb, that I only caught like the last couple words.
And my phone has decided to kick me out of Bible studies.
Oh.
It did that halfway through, and I was like, are you serious?
No,
I just got kicked out. Let me
terrible.
go back.
Sorry. I just want to make sure that we just don't leave
so
people
Deb's
hanging.
initial question was, what if he put it in cloth but took it out and is now trying to make it work? And we said, that would be a really interesting scenario. That's not what we're talking about right now. And she followed it and said, it's not a real person. I'm talking about someone now hiding what God gave them, afraid to let it show, but now's brave enough to take it out to try and make it work.
Oh, okay.
What happens then? Yeah, great question. You've been given something by God. Maybe you weren't faithful with it in the past. He's still giving it to you. You still have an opportunity to be faithful with it.
Yes.
He's still giving it to you. You still have that opportunity. Until the moment that we pass away, we are consistently given opportunity after opportunity after opportunity by the graciousness of God to pursue him and to pursue being good stewards of everything that he's given us. And so, yeah, maybe for many of us, we've kind of tucked it away in a handkerchief, been reckless about it, been afraid of it, chose not to use it. You can make the decision to change that right now. God's still there for it. He's in for it. What are your thoughts on it?
Oh, I love what you just said. Yeah, I totally agree with Noelle. I think if we can kind of put this into today's terms, maybe this last guy who hid it in the handkerchief is someone who enjoys the blessings of God in their life. They have family, there's love in their life, They have a job, maybe they used to have a job.
They live in this country, this is a great place to live.
Food on the table, they have intellect, logic, they can think, their body is working well. All these things that he's given them that basically all belong to him because they're all gifts from him. And all we're saying is the person who squanders all of that, who has no thought for God at all. In fact, if they do have any thought for God, it's, oh, God is so unfair. God is so unjust. I don't want anything to do with him. I don't even believe in God. What kind of a God would allow such and such? And they indict him. Do you see it? Do you kind of hear that in this guy? He's indicting the nobleman as being unjust, and people do that with God all the time. I think that's more what this is. I'm just guessing, Deb, that you're saying more like, I've had this thought, and like, I know I need to be doing more. I need to, I want to, I've been afraid to. That's a whole different attitude than this guy. He's not needing, wanting, or
again,
afraid.
we're talking about a heart posture. We're talking about where your heart is. And the heart of the first two servants was one of gratitude. And I want to serve you. You have entrusted me with this. I'm going to do my absolute best with it. I'm going to try.
I'm going to leverage it.
And somebody said, I think Roberta said, it would have been better for them to have tried and failed
Yes.
than to do what this guy did and
Yes.
just refuse to try and have a bad attitude about it.
Roberta, A+ for that.
It's a
Yes.
wonderful statement. Yeah, what he said here, and I really love this, he says, put this money to work until I come back. Somebody else says that their translation says, go do business with this money. He doesn't say to them, I expect you to get X return on this money, and I expect to come back with, X, Y, and Z investment, and please have your sheet of how you did. He just says, put this money to work. Be pragmatic about this.
Yeah.
Go do it.
Make it work. And I'll tell you, when that's your heart,
Yeah.
God gives you opportunities. And I think that's more what this is saying. Like, as you use what God has given to you, he'll give you more chances. He said, what if he tried and he lost the minute? I don't know. I mean, that's just hypothetical, Brad. It's a great question. It's not really part of the story. So I don't want to go beyond what Jesus said. So I can't imagine, like, in real life how I try to serve the Lord and I end up losing the Lord. So I don't know that really works. But it's a good, I hear where you're coming from, and I'm glad that you're thinking along those lines.
And I think the thing that's most important here is that the minna is a representation of the things that God has given us.
Mm-hmm.
And gifts come in more ways than just physical, monetary, established attributes, right? Some of the gifts that God has given you, I mean, you might be an incredible musician, and God gave you that gift to worship him with. That's
maybe
huge.
to lead others in
Yeah,
worship with, or
that's
to
huge.
lead your children in worship.
That's incredible. Maybe God has given you a gift to just be an empathetic, kind person. He expects you to leverage that for the kingdom if he's given you that gift.
Yeah.
And to not would be really in just kind of throwing that in the face of God.
Yeah.
As Susie says, the gift of salvation.
That's offered to all of us.
That's the ultimate gift, right?
Yeah.
And to squander that
Sandy,
would be crazy.
Excellent point here. Sandy
Time
says,
is a gift.
time is a gift, especially now. Exactly. What are you
Great
doing with
statement.
your time? We have so much more than we used to have, right? So leveraging your time. Thank you, Sandy. That was really
fantastic.
good. I know we need to wrap this up because of our time. But I do want to deal with this one statement because it can be a little disconcerting. Verse 26, I tell you that to everyone who has, more shall be given, but from the one who does not have, even what he does have shall be
Honestly,
taken
I
away.
wanted to just do this tomorrow night because somebody
Oh,
else
good.
already brought up.
Yeah.
So for those of you who went to a secular university like I did, you may have taken an economics class and heard of this thing called the Matthew Principle. This is the same story that they're referring to except in Matthew. And it's this principle: to those who have, more will be given. And from those who have nothing, even what they have will be taken away. And it's been extrapolated into this economics principle. And so those of us who are reading this through that eyes, and maybe were taught that in university, are like, oh, I hate that principle. And it's like, it's a really unfair and yucky and unjust one. And it's like, how could a loving God be okay with that? What does that mean? And that's not what this is saying. But I really would love to do it tomorrow night.
Love that. Yeah,
because this is so cool. This is so cool. I don't want to rush this. The rest of this parable, we'll stop here and we'll start up again tomorrow night. This is a really hard parable. And I think what's super interesting is, even in doing the research and reading some of these other pastors and theologians and commentators, people get this wrong all the time.
Yeah.
And the reason that you would get this passage wrong is if you did not recognize that this is about salvation.
Yes.
Every single parable that Jesus told is about salvation.
In some aspect.
Yeah. In fact, everything Jesus does is about salvation. It is about how to have your sins forgiven.
And a relationship with God.
And a relationship. Yeah. And so everything that we're talking about ultimately culminates in, have you accepted that gift of salvation? Have you decided that you want to commit your life to Jesus Christ? Is this where you are right now? Do you want to have a relationship with Jesus Christ? And if you haven't made that decision yet and you're going, I think I want that. You read the story of Zacchaeus and you're like, that sort of intense heart change is me. Like, I feel like that's how my heart has been changed through Jesus Christ. That's something that God does in your heart. That's something that is entirely internal, but expresses itself externally. And one of the things that we do just as an external expression of what God's doing in your heart is to just pray a prayer, just verbalizing what's going on. And so I'm going to ask you to lead us in that tonight. Would you be willing to walk us through that prayer?
Let's go to prayer. It's what's in your heart. Remember, it's not about the words, except those are just putting some skin on the bones of your heart. Lord Jesus, we come before you recognizing right now what sinners we are. And Lord, just that feeling of humility, like Zacchaeus, just like, wow, I don't know why you would pick me. Of all the people, I don't bring anything to the table, Lord. I'm not a good person. I know that. I don't have anything to offer you. I know that. And yet for some reason, I know you are working in my heart tonight. I know that you're calling me to be one of your children. So I humbly reach out and just say, would you save me from my sins? Not just this moment, Lord, but save me from all my sins, my past sins, my present sins, my future sins. Make me your child and take me to heaven to be with you forever. And Lord, my cry of my heart, much like Zacchaeus, is whatever I can do out of response of just absolute love and gratitude, I want to do that for you as your child. So whatever you put in my path, give me the strength and the courage to take it on and to do it. Help me to be a good servant of yours. And thank you for the gift of salvation, something I could never have gotten on my own. Thank you so much. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Well, this was a good night. I love this story and I'm excited to finish it up with you tomorrow night.
The triumphal entry we start tomorrow.
Folks, if you thought, and I hope you did, I hope you've enjoyed it up to this point. I hope you've enjoyed the Bible study. But it is about to go into the next gear. Like this, what's about to happen, we are barreling towards the crucifixion right now at intense speeds and things are heating up. What we're about to cover over the next couple of nights is truly going to completely change your perspective of God, of Jesus Christ, of salvation, of what happened on the cross, of what happened leading up to it, of how incredibly, I don't even know how to put this, like the excellence of how the narrative of Scripture is woven together. It is truly supernatural. It is impossible that a human could have put this together over the course of thousands of years and, you know, dozens of different writers. It's incredible. All that to say, you have to come back tomorrow. You have to come back. You have to join us. Whether you're joining us live, we love to have you live because then we can comment with you and chat. If you're joining us on YouTube, we also appreciate that. And you can comment in the comments and we'll respond, not live, but still is good. Yeah. We look forward to tomorrow night. In the meantime, go make good decisions, team. We love you all. Good night.
Good night.